We're back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. Fun half, ladies and gentlemen. Emma out today. We will take phone calls. I promise you. Clearwater. In a time where the Democrats need to build broader coalitions to fight fascism, Ezra still believes we need to kneecap portions of the coalition. That's a fun way to completely kill the Democratic Party.
To be fair, there are portions of the coalition like Mark Andreessen that I would like to see kneecapped. So, in order to fight fascism, frankly.
Josh in Atlanta. This is the first libertarian debate you've had in years. LOL. Nassau County spokesperson. Congresswoman Debbie Dingler of Michigan fell asleep in the middle of a hearing. I feel like Ezra is roundabouting corruption. The reason there's no legislation or power to use to help working class common folk is because of corruption and capitulation. Curious that Abundance gets $120 million in support. I wonder why he isn't in favor of bottom-up policies and government protections. Spielkis. Also, it's the Chuck Mangione line. I'd be a fool not to accept the bride. Saturn Girl. I don't think Matt gets enough credit. He basically carries the show with his intelligence, passion for human rights. This isn't my opinion. It's science. Love you. Leftist is bestest.
Always saying that.
Figgy. Abundance. More like a bunt of shit.
Okay. A bit crude. Crass.
Alex from Rhode Island. Oh, yeah. We already did that. Dave from Tallinn. I'm shocked that at least half the MR crew thought that the star of Cyrano de Bergerac was invented by Sam. Damn, I'm old.
Old enough to see the original run of Cyrano de Bergerac?
I don't even know what that's in reference to.
Cyrano, it's an old Italian play about...
No, I know what the play is. I just don't know what that's in reference to.
Oh, yeah, I have no idea. Who's on first?
Didn't you see... Roxanne, was that the one with Steve Martin? Yeah, that was the Cyrano de Bergerac, remake, as it were.
I think every cartoon in the 90s had a Cyrano de Bergerac episode.
Lavender Allergy. If I wrote a book and Richie Torres liked it, I would burn all the copies I still had in my possession. Kowalski from Nebraska. Cutting SNAP benefits is not just evil in the sense that politicians will burn in hell for this, but economically it's not sound. From a pragmatic standpoint, people are desperate, and since we need food to survive, we can either A, give them food in the form of welfare, or B, they will steal the food. If they steal the food, one of two things will happen. They'll get away with it, meaning the grocery store eats the loss, which is a tax write-off, so we all pay for it, or they get caught and arrested. While in custody of the state, we'll have to feed them and pay for them, and probably disrupted their children's lives as well, and it harms the chance of future employment, thus undermining the mission of the cruelty. Well, first off, the mission is short term. If they can kick this down the road and not have it show up in the balance sheet when they pass this tax cuts, mission accomplished. They don't give a shit about long-term, the long-term implications of these. The whole game is to push it down the road. I mean, on some level, like, that's the problem with having complaining about filters on these apartments, because the kids are going to have asthma, and they're going to be low-income kids getting asthma definitionally, and we're going to have to pay for this if you want to look at it without, bled of morality and just justice. And so it is incredibly short-sighted. And, part of what frustrated me about that conversation is, like, there's only two routes. We don't have a villain who's really in front, although they're sort of nebulous, but we vaguely know who they are. It's we have larded up government with bad regulations, and we spend too much time concerning ourselves with different constituencies that are not mission critical. But I think making sure that the public housing we have doesn't give kids asthma is mission critical. And so we need to find a third way of doing this. If it's too expensive in San Francisco to build housing because there's too much competition, well, from Ezra's standpoint, it's public housing that's too expensive. But what we could do to even the playing field is make it that expensive, make it so that the other housing is maybe brought up to certain standards, A, and B, impose rent control, or C, higher taxation rate on the capital gains from your home and not use it as a vehicle for wealth building. I mean, they do complain in the book that housing has become such a central asset to people. And in some instances, it's the only way to create and start intergenerational wealth. But I'm quite sure that we could figure out with the tax code a way in which to promote and allow for that intergenerational wealth in families that haven't had that money. You know, you don't want a wealth tax? How about your wealth determines your tax rate on your capital gains? How much it would add to, or as a function of income. Why should all capital gains be treated the same as opposed to it being a function of income? You want to provide for intergenerational wealth and protect that for traditionally underprivileged communities. Black people weren't able to buy homes in certain areas that were going to increase value. There's ways of doing that within the context of the tax code. You could just simply apply an income tax and allow the value of the home to be depreciated or pushed 5 years across. You could depreciate that against your income for the next 5 or 10 years. And then wealthy people will have to pay more on their capital gains, or really on the income they've made from that home. There's a lot of different ways of doing it. There's a multitude, but for whatever reason, the only answer they come up with is roll back things that would put an air filter in somebody's home. I mean, I'm sure there's some regulations that are bad, but it is striking to me that Tim Carney and Ezra Klein had the exact same procedure with what they anticipate as being completely opposite outcomes. And this is the problem. Like, I got news for you. The people dumping $120 million and more into this as a movement, I get the sense that they may have another agenda. I'm not saying that that Ezra or Derek do, but sometimes
I'd be interested. Like I read the book last night too, and I was interested in the talk about housing and how some of that goes over with, say, members of Congress that are basically there to represent the type of single family, wealthy type folks that are a big block on this. But my main problem is this framing of red versus blue states, because this is from Bozeman Daily Chronicle last September. Double-edged sword. Montana's housing market least affordable in entire U.S. Montana's housing affordability crisis made headlines in the campaign. From 2018 to 2023, median home sales in Montana rose from 266,000 to 500,000. And Montana's a red state.
Also, when I asked Ezra, what is the politics of this? He said, I'm not a politician. He literally just got back from the Democratic Senate caucus. And I got to think, this is weird timing for the Senate Democrats to be worrying about how to deregulate housing policy, because they don't have a majority. They don't have Congress. They're not local zoning boards. It's weird. It's weird then to say, I'm not a politician, I don't know.
Actually, that's the one question I wish I would have remembered to have you ask him is, when you were constructing this, was it anticipating Dems controlling the White House? And does Trump coming in change any of the way you would have approached
Well, this? I mean, there was a lot. Honestly, I could have gone another hour, because a lot of the Doge stuff They've cut the equity.
Right.
They cut the entire department of the EPA that was looking at environmental justice. Is that a good thing? Are we going to get a lot more housing now in San Francisco? Right? That's what's supposed to happen. We're going to see this ballooning of housing now because there's no part of the EPA that even is going to in any way.
Elon Musk seemed to think it was a good idea.
What, Doge?
Yeah, he retweeted a clip of Ezra talking through the deregulation stuff.
Yeah. But it turned out that clip they were wrong about. That was a clip where they were talking about the BEAD. Is that what it was? The rural internet stuff, I think.
And then they corrected themselves, right?
And they had the story wrong. Again, it was like we larded up all these things that made it impossible for the uptake. And it turns out that the people negotiating were like, no, we had to make concessions to Republicans and conservative Democrats. And we thought that essentially they were making the, well, it's better to have the dirty filter. The only way we can get this thing is if like there's no filter on this housing next to the highway. And it turned out in this instance, just didn't work because incumbent interests didn't see the profit in it.
Kind of the whole ambiguity you were trying to tease out is responsible for that.
It was tough. Josh from Minnesota. Does Ezra's book contain any numbers demonstrating higher costs are actually from environmental regulations? I can't find anything from a quick Google search. Well, he's done reporting where different builders in a city or two have said that environmental regulations are difficult for them. And there are numbers. I mean, we can look at what it costs for public housing, but versus private construction of public housing. And the government has more requirements in spending public funds than when they give grants.
I think it's a lot of inferential stuff, like the costs of building have increased after certain policies were enacted.
Kowalski, to give Ezra the benefit of the doubt, I understand the logic he's coming from, but it's flawed. At the end of the day, it's all profit incentives. Housing in the United States is a retirement vehicle, so people do not, under any circumstance, want the value of their housing to go down. Indeed, this is basic supply and demand market manipulation tactics. In California, they don't want to build houses because it will cause the value of housing to go down. That screws with people's retirement plans. Okay, so his answer would be, well, why doesn't it work that way in Texas? And my argument would be, well, in the wealthy areas where they have power, it does. In the areas where there's not as much political power because there's not as much money, it doesn't. Money protects money. And to Matt's point, 50 years from now, if Houston runs out of space and the value of this property goes up, I can assure you they're going to be issuing less permits. This is a function of money protecting money.
NIMBYs are people who own backyards.
Southern California also has a water shortage crisis, and San Francisco is building up against topography that's not ideal for construction. In Texas, they're building housing, but they're ignoring environmental regulations, and many of their homes are built in floodplains along the coast or have a massively expensive down-the-road cost to replace water and sewage infrastructure that Texas probably won't be able to afford in 30 years. Yes. So the hard left position is an anti-child asthma position. I can get behind that. Felonious friend. I can tell you nearly 150 Americans have an answer to the question, have you ever been convicted, found guilty of a crime? Prisoner theory is my dissertation. Very simply, The word crime and word criminal have become synonymous. This is not marginalization. This is dehumanization, a paradigm shift. What we see is this crazy ass rendition is barely identifiable masses of things moving the line. We see order, obedience, and like the showing of animals at the fair or auction. Please check out Prisoner Theory Institute. Website is prisonertheory.com. Let's see here. Sorry, I lost my... all right, let's go to... let's start with Bobby Kennedy. Is RFK Jr. is at... in front of... what is this? This is the... is this the congressional budget? No. This is... this is a congressional budget hearing, I guess, to... justify maybe HHS cuts? I don't know. Here's Mark Pocan. Is that Pocan? Yeah. Mark Pocan asking Kennedy, incidentally, what are we at for measles right now across the country?
It's here.
North of 1,000, I would imagine, at least.
Something that might be helpful is you've previously said you've vaccinated your children. Just because I think this is a helpful answer, and this isn't a gotcha, I promise. If you had a child today, would you vaccinate that child for measles?
For measles, probably for measles. What I would say is my opinions about vaccines are irrelevant.
Whoa, wait. What? Wait. Can someone get me a flow chart and tell me he's the Secretary of Health and Human Services. He hires the head of the CDC, or is his boss, right?
He also recommended the Surgeon General nominee.
It's weird. His opinion on whether people should get vaccinated is irrelevant.
Yeah, my opinion on which...
I'm curious, is there a law that forces him to do everything in his power to make sure that people get vaccinated against the measles? Do we have statutory obligation by the head of Health and Human Services to make sure that that measles vaccinations are promoted? I don't think so. Maybe I'm wrong. That's a fascinating answer. We have over 1,001 confirmed cases. And they are outbreak associated, maybe 928 of them. There were 16 outbreaks reported during 2024. This is in 2025. When he came in, there were less, I believe, than 250. There have been 3 confirmed deaths from measles in this year. You have 1,001 total cases. Let's hear again. I just want to hear if I heard him correctly. He is the Secretary of Health and Human Services.
Vaccinate that child for measles.
For measles, probably for measles. What I would say is my opinions about vaccines are irrelevant. I have directed Jay Bhattacharya.
Sure. No, like I said, I don't want to.
So that everybody can make that decision. But I don't want to seem like I'm being evasive.
Yeah.
But I don't think people should be taking medical advice from me.
Right. No, I got that. And
pause it for a second.
I agree with that.
People should not be taking. In fact, you know what else he should not be doing? He should not be in charge of health policy for the entire nation.
Yeah, that's kind of why we
public
objected to
health, the highest ranking public health official in the country.
Tell that to the Senate.
330 million people, and he's the guy in charge. He's the guy in charge of public health. People should not be taking medical advice from me. Well, maybe people should not be calling you when they got a headache, but this is a question of public health. Go ahead.
I don't want to seem like I'm being evasive.
Yeah.
But I don't think people should be taking advice, medical advice from me.
Right. No, I got that. And I'm not asking you to give them medical advice, but would you vaccinate your child for measles?
I answer that question directly, that it will seem like I'm giving advice to other people, and I don't want to be doing that. I want people to make
But that's kind of your jurisdiction because CDC does give advice, right? I'm not trying to do it as a gotcha. I was just
Yeah. What?
Oh, pause it. How about doing it as a gotcha? How about doing it as a gotcha?
Who should they take it from then? Not doctors.
Should the U.S. government can be completely out of the picture? Why do we even have a CDC? Like, what? Why do we have a CDC? I mean, if the measles vaccine is unhealthy for people, why would the CDC not come out and say it's unhealthy? It's either good for public health or it's bad for public health. And if the CDC can't determine that, we don't need a CDC. And if the CDC is not going to tell us what its findings are, then we don't need a CDC. I mean, that seems to be the theory behind all of the cuts. We don't need public health. Everybody should just go online, maybe ask ChatGPT or whatever it is, make their determination as to whether or not there should be a vaccine. And then incidentally, we should also hope that the private firms that are supposedly making the measles vaccination have done it according to, good standards. Because we don't have a CDC or anybody else to provide standards for these things at that point. Why would you provide standards for vaccinations that you don't think are in the best interest of public health? It's a waste of money. I mean, this is so effed up. It's so effed up.
This should have been the follow-up.
What would you say you do here?
Like, what's your job?
Exactly. Oh, here, let's just watch the Kennedys swim in the fecal.
Apparently a not safe creek to swim in.
Well, whatever.
Sure.
We'll see. Maybe it'll be fine. I mean, this is just insane.
That's the thing is like, yeah, you as an individual, it is relevant what you've been saying on vaccines, even before you had the position that you admit you're apparently not qualified for, whether it's measles here or abroad. And now that you do have that Secretary of Health and Human Services, it is relevant that you message positively about the measles and don't act like it's some sort of mystery of science.
One never knows. One never knows.
Yeah, they should trust doctors who say, what the answer should have been is, don't take it from me, take it from medical professionals would say, of course, idiot, vaccinate your kid for measles.
He went to Texas a few weeks ago and met with the family of someone whose kid died from measles, and then was sort of pressured into saying he does think people should be vaccinated for measles, but I guess he wasn't under oath there, so...
Union Muppet, my union, Sesame Workers Union, made of workers for the nonprofit behind Sesame Street, will be having its vote count tomorrow, and we expect to win big. Everyone can follow our Instagram or Blue Sky at Sesame Workers Union. At Sesame Workers Union. If they want to keep appraised of news or find links to buy some swag, Union made in Worcester.
Oh, shit.
Oh, damn it. I'm going there right now.
Followed.
Are you kidding me? I love that. Why are we not buying merch from Worcester? Somebody's it's all
Heads are gonna roll.
Heads are gonna roll around here. It's all the equity and
groups.
What about Worcester equity? Al Conniption, Mendoza Line. That's what it was. Not the Mendoza.
Maginot Line was the France one, right? Where they tried to stop the...
Maginot was the line.
Yeah, the thing you're talking about is the replacement level, I think, batting average, maybe?
Oh, yeah, no, I'm not talking about the Mendoza line. I'm talking about the Maginot line, like where you cross, like it's crossing the Rubicon. I believe, oh, right, okay. Level 33 bureaucrat, at the end of the day, comes back to material conditions. Militant apathy, Maginot line. I bought 2 pawpaw trees from there. Good company. Oh, they're from Fast Growing Trees. Salty Ezra is cool AF. Dan from Columbus. Sam said something like the Mangiono line. Did he mean Mendoza line? No. Imagine going to a job interview and saying my opinions of subject that my job is directly tied to are not important. Sam's tortured analogies. Hey, crew, please try and get George Monbiot as a guest. Yeah, we've had him on. Garrett from Mass. Bro, I drive a Chevy. Okay. Tomo Flink. Happy Friends Day Wednesday, folks. Here in Britain yesterday, Peter Sullivan had his murder conviction thrown out after serving 38 years for the 1986 of Diane Sindall crime he has now been forensically proven not to have committed. The prosecution will not seek a new trial for Sullivan, effectively conceding that Sullivan should have never been charged in the first place. Sullivan, now age 68, is believed to have mild learning difficulties, and at the time of his arrest in 86, was initially denied access to a lawyer, an appropriate person to safeguard his welfare in police custody. During his trial in 87, the prosecution claimed that Sullivan confessed to the murder, that he provided conflicting information about his whereabouts on the night the murder was committed, as well as the spurious claim that bite marks on the victim matched Sullivan. I hope those pigs die lonely, destitute, and in a constant state of fear and dread, both outside and in their homes. They don't deserve peace. Horrible. Let's do 4 and then 5 and then we'll do Crowder. Again, this fight is heating up in the House Energy Committee on Medicaid. This is once you're kicked off Medicaid, according to AOC? Well, listen to this. I didn't realize this part of the bill.
And the math is not adding up. They're trying to convince people that they are cutting millions of undocumented people from payroll, from Medicare, acting as though this is what's going to save it. Even if you believe everything that Republicans have said today, they are identifying 1 million, their claim, which I dispute, but if you believe them, their claim is that 1 million undocumented people are on Medicaid. So why are they trying to cut 13.7 million Americans off their health care? By the Republicans' own Energy and Commerce tweet this morning, their claim is 7.6 million people are somehow ineligible for health care. So why are they cutting 13.7 million Americans off their health care? They've asked us to read this bill, and we have. This bill bans the people that they kick off of Medicaid from even buying their own insurance from the Affordable Care Act exchange. So once you are kicked off Medicaid, you then can't even buy your own health insurance.
Pause it. I just want to be clear on this now. So the Affordable Care Act in the states that it's operating in has different tiers in which you're eligible for certain subsidies, whether you're above 133% of the poverty line, 200, 400%, whatnot. And essentially what I guess this bill does is it boots you off, pretends that you're undocumented, essentially, and you are not eligible for subsidies. You probably can go buy it, but at a cost that's completely prohibitive. Good.
So once you are kicked off Medicaid, you then can't even buy your own health insurance. It increases costs for people who they deem eligible and who are low income and forces them to pay even more. And if you have a private insurer, don't worry, you're getting screwed over too, because your healthcare premiums are going to skyrocket from the disaster that is happening from this bill.
And just to be clear on that last part, people who lose Medicaid still get sick. They still can get hit by a bus. They still can get cancer. They will not go to the doctor to treat some minor thing until it turns into a major thing because of the cost. And then they'll go to the emergency room, and then we will all pay for it. So even if you feel that people who are poor are not morally righteous enough to deserve health care, even if for your own self-interest, understand that it's going to jack up costs for everybody.
Penny wise and pound foolish. It's like, I forget the example Kowalski cited, but it's also like student loans, the food stamps, right? Like that's good for the economy, for people to be able to feed themselves and pay
and
stores.
Farmers.
And also like student loans, like we act like that's good common sense to make people pay back their entirety of their student loans, when if they just could keep that money and spend it in their local economy, it would be better for everybody involved.
Is this number 5? Oh, what is this? Number 3?
This is 3, yep.
Oh, let's do the pharmaceuticals afterwards because we're going to do both those back to back. Here's number 5. Just had a report that Debbie Dingle fell asleep in the middle of a hearing yesterday. I mean, it happens. I'm old. There are times I fall asleep. Sitting there, watching a show with Saul, and I fall asleep. Sure, not every hearing is so titillating that you stay awake, although, you sort of should. It's your job, but things happen.
The great Aaron Rupar pointed out it was hour 20 of the hearing.
It was hour 20?
That was according to Aaron Rupar.
All right. Well, this is sort of an awkward moment where Chuck Schumer is forced to respond to reporting in Jake Tapper's book. And I got to be honest with you. I don't care about Joe Biden anymore. I think that the circle of people who were aware of Joe Biden's state, really aware of whether he could even continue, and he clearly could not continue, will never be held to account, or we have no mechanism for it. And it's quite clear that Jill Biden, Emma texted me this last night. Joe Biden brought Joe Biden out because they were anticipating the release of this book. And they wanted to prove that Joe Biden's in great shape. And that did not work out well. You know what else? It also didn't work out well when he didn't drop out of running for the president. And to Ezra Klein's credit, he called for Biden to drop out very early. Maybe certainly the highest platform person to do it the earliest. Here's Chuck Schumer having to answer the question about Joe Biden when everybody's got a question about him as well.
Messaging that you always say that the Republic is on the side for. Sir, I really do want to ask you about something that has been breaking out of CNN. Our Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson have written a book called Original Sin, and they call it a cover-up of Biden's health and his cognition and his fitness, quite frankly, to be president of the United States. You sat next to Biden in the Oval Office, February 27th, 2024, just a handful of months before the president took that debate stage. And it was later reported that you and other Democratic leaders were talking before the debate about having a plan. You and Hakeem Jeffries, Nancy Pelosi, Barack Obama. I understand you later denied that ever happened. But I am curious, I'm interested to know whether the man that you saw sitting there on that couch on that day, you were in there, you saw him up close and personal. Did you really not have any idea that he was not fit to serve a second term?
Casey, we're looking forward. We have the largest Medicaid cut in front of us. We have the whole federal
You're
government
facing all
at
of this
risk.
because you lost a presidential election. And is that not Joe Biden's responsibility for deciding to run again?
We're looking forward.
That's it?
That's it.
All right. Senator Chuck.
Yep. Okay. Well, I think we know the answer to that question. I mean, one of the ways to move forward is to go, actually, no, he was very astute in that moment. And I was really surprised, but these things can happen. There can be a big drop off.
Moving forward like you just committed a hit and run.
Exactly.
Don't look back in the rear
Don't look
view.
back in the rearview mirror. Oh, wait, is there a body lying in the street? Well,
Pretty sure that was just like
bygones be bygones. It won't make any difference now if
I'm
I
looking
circle
down
back
this street
around.
now. I took a quick left turn and now it
Exactly. Gone. All right. That worked out well. Oh, my God. Look, I wouldn't want to give anybody any ideas, but let me tell you this. We won't rest. We won't rest.
They're asking him about something like a year ago. Maybe given his own age, he doesn't remember.
What? I don't know what you're talking about. All right. 646-257-3920. 646-257-3920. We'll try and take some calls. All the time went away today. Here is Fox News host Gillian Turner asking the most basic question of a senator, Jim Risch. Where is he from? Idaho? About the president's statement or executive order on lowering drug prices. This feels like something you would do like 3 weeks before an election and go like, I'm doing this in 4 weeks. And because it is so obvious nothing's going to happen. Like he made this announcement to basically take heat off of his folding on the China tariffs.
and how pissed people are at like the NIH funding stuff and how that's rippling through.
This is completely this was completely a way of just like changing the topic. And so now everybody has to do cleanup. Like, how is this actually going to happen?
Your competing cable networks of giving the president credit for this. This was a huge thing that happened, and it got almost no media at all.
Well, sir, to be fair, you know, the president issued this major executive order, but that doesn't mean that pharmaceutical costs at pharmacies will automatically shoot down tomorrow.
Well, what his objective is one.
Pause it. Incidentally, that's a nice way to say it doesn't seem clear that pharmaceutical costs are ever going to shoot down at all. Right. Not tomorrow, not the next day, not the day after.
What his objective is one of the basic things he wanted to do correctly is to say that Americans aren't going to pay more for drugs than other countries are. It's common knowledge in this country that Canadians and Europeans, for the exact same pharmaceutical,
yes, sir, but what is the, I guess if you could explain to it, what is the enforcement mechanism?
Before she asks this, one way for us not to pay more than other countries is to not really save us any money, but make other countries pay more.
That's the plan.
Exactly.
That's what he articulated. We're going to make them pay more. But let's see. But listen, the point isn't whether or not you're paying thousands of dollars for medication. You're going to be comforted, and your healing is probably going to improve because you're going to know those mofo Canadians,
damn Europeans,
and French people are not getting away with cheap medication. It's like, this pill's costing me an arm and a leg, but at least those freaking frogs are not getting away with it. Yep.
Get the free, the
yeah.
cheap Ozempic.
Yeah.
So annoying.
The Canadians and Europeans, for the exact same pharmaceutical.
Yes, sir, but what is the, I guess if you could explain to it, what is the enforcement mechanism? What prerogative does the president have to actually make that come true for Americans?
Well, there's all kinds of enforcement mechanisms, not the least of which the order says what it says, and that is that they can't sell drugs at a higher rate. If they do, they're going to be facing a class action by the consumers, and secondly, they're going to be facing an action by the Justice Department that says you can't do this. There's an executive order that says you can't. Good stuff on his part. Let's give credit where credit's due here.
It is, sir, as you say, always easier to criticize. Thank you for taking time out with us.
I'm sorry for asking the most obvious question. The idea that there's going to be a class action or a criminal or civil action on behalf of consumers or the DOJ based on an executive order, I got news for you, ain't going to happen. It's not the law. I mean, whether or not Trump even has the ability, I don't even know statutorily if you could dictate the price that a U.S. company, or for that matter, a foreign company, is charging in a foreign country. I'm not even sure if there would be authority to do that, but there's no legislation, there's no law. It's just Donald Trump's opinion and ask, and you can't sue based on that.
I do like that torts are now the Republican solution to medical costs.
Yes, we need exactly tort reform. All right. Well, look, maybe there's a brainiac who can explain this to us. We need to talk to a policy person on this who's going to explain to us how it is that Donald Trump's executive order saying that drug companies can't give Europeans a break on drugs relative to us is in any way enforceable or is going to do anything other than allow Donald Trump to pretend like he's doing something about drug prices. We got to go to a policy expert. Do we have somebody? Oh, yes. Let's go to the Crowder Institute.
Wonk.
Yeah. Germany, let's say we're paying here, we're paying $50,000 for a drug. And in Germany, they're paying $5,000. All right? Now that doesn't
incidentally
happen.
The 50,000 might register, but the 5,000 probably unlikely. It's even cheaper than that. But he's got to make it seem like, wait a second. I mean, even as the words come out of his mouth, he's like, well, why aren't we all moving to Germany? Like, why have I been making fun of Europeans for so long? Oh, okay.
Germany, they're paying $5,000. All right? Now that doesn't happen. And you think that that might affect Germany, liberal progressive Germany, subsidizing green energy? Well, they also purchase, by the way, fossil fuels from Russia. Do you think that Germany would get to the point of declaring internet a fundamental human right and giving it to all of their citizens for free if before that they actually had to pay a fair price for drugs that were created and developed here? No, absolutely not. This shifts the dynamics of...
Pause it. Let me just be clear here. So his argument is, now, can you look up and see what how many billions in profit drug companies made? Because it seems to me that there would be no difference in price between Germany and France and Canada and anywhere else in Europe as to the drug prices if it was just all being subsidized by us.
So
if none of the development could actually even happen, none of it could exist, except for the largesse of our companies who are now making... And listen, I want you to sit down because this is going to be gut-wrenching and heart-wrenching for you. The profits that drug companies are making. Are you looking that up? No?
Yeah, well, in revenue, it was $1.4 trillion in 2022.
Oh, okay, but that's just revenue.
Just revenue.
That's just revenue.
Yeah, you got to subtract R&D, you got to subtract marketing.
Okay, can you get me the profits?
I'll try.
In 2022, 10 large pharmaceutical companies made over $112 billion.
Oh, 112 billion? Okay, that's horrible. These people are just eking by. All right, but here we go. Like, so do you think they're going to be able to do good things in Germany?
Do you know they have pharmaceutical companies outside America? Like some of the big ones?
Biotin? The one
Novartis,
that did, the one that did, the one that did the COVID vaccine. Well, of course, that was just a scam anyways.
Yeah, right.
We import 40% of our drugs, at least, and partially, 40% full on we import. But somehow, the drugs have to go up if they're going to go down in price here. We don't want to cut into any profits.
Yeah, I mean, not that they could use those profits for sort of innovation and research. They have to just make sure that they get the same amount of profit to have their giant homes and stuff and do the innovation.
Free. If before that they actually had to pay a fair price for drugs that were created and developed here, no, absolutely not. This shifts the dynamics of, it takes away the moral high horse of socialists.
Yeah.
This is one thing too. You'll hear the left. They always say, well, the United States is not a truly capitalist system. That's true. That's true. But these other nations certainly champion and brag about their socialism and how we're the only nation that doesn't follow suit. Well, the truth is, none of these systems are actually true socialist systems. They rely on the free enterprise and the ingenuity and the industry of you, the American worker. So flip that argument around. Well, there really is no true capitalism. There really is.
So the argument is that we are subsidizing the free ride that Europe has. Yeah. There's no interest. I mean, you could extend this to like how we are paying for NATO and all these other entities. Maybe we should pull back our bases. Do you think we're going to do that? Or is that we are actually, it's busy work, make work for U.S.
There's good profit
corporations there. And we're all subsidizing the whole world, our ingenuity. Do you understand what would happen to the European political talk show industry if we decided to just pull back a couple of hours a week? Like the amount of research we're doing, just completely subsidizing these bastards.
Suit. Well, the truth is, none of these systems are actually true socialist systems. They rely on the free enterprise and the ingenuity and the industry of you, the American worker. So flip that argument around them. Well, there really is no true capitalist system. There really is no true socialist system because you do it only because we don't.
So, yeah, I mean, this is the funny thing. Of course, there's mixed economies, and there's even China. Like, it was a hedge fund that created the AI that freaked out all of those people. But the issue with Crowder is he's trying to naturalize the idea that these pharmaceutical companies will take billions of dollars in profits, and that they're just hamstrung by the damn Europeans that they have to give a good deal to, so they can only make up for it by rinsing Americans.
It's like, what is the minimum amount of profit the drug companies should make? Hundreds of billions? Insane.
This is from NewYorkRequirements.com. New York continuing requirements quickly and affordably. Pfizer, $31 billion in 2022. That is $994 per second. Johnson & Johnson, $17 billion, $568 per second. Merck, $14 billion. They make money.
I love Tesla. It warms my heart to see Crowder look so shitty. May he always look as disgusting on the outside as he is on the inside. Calling from a 352 area code.
Hello.
Hello.
This is Matt from Central Florida.
Hello,
and
Matt.
I have an idea for action concerning attempted cuts to Social Security that I'd like your opinions on.
Okay.
So I have been thinking that it could be a useful way to address attempts to close offices, force people to go to remote offices, make appointments online when it's seniors who may not be familiar with apps and websites. And the idea that I have is to do a tailgate-style caravan that would operate sort of like rolls to the polls. And the idea would be to get people to kind of work together, not unlike something that might be called somewhat anarchist, with the goal of essentially trying to provide people with a way to, have their appeals made, even though they're clearly trying to create structural barriers to that. And so the idea would not be just to get them rides, but to also try and help provide tech support for people, because they're probably going to make it a requirement to have, digitally created appointments, And it may also have the added benefit of putting lines of cars around the block where the offices are. And so that's the general gist of the idea.
So wait, are you talking about like basically a bus service or a van service to the offices?
Yes, and ideally organized by progressive candidates, but what are your thoughts?
Well, my understanding is that, and I don't know the status of this, but my understanding is that they rolled back the requirement or the requirement of coming into office for that ID for new ID verification for new applicants. That's my understanding. They've closed a lot of regional offices though. So I don't know, but maybe you can do like a mobile, like 3G, van where people just come in, sign up through that van because to help them with technology. I don't know. It's a good idea. I think Social Security is a great thing to run on. It involves a lot of resources to do what you're talking about. But I don't know. Maybe send it. You should do tweet at Alex Lawson. Social Security works. There's nobody who is more creative or inventive in terms of doing that type of advocacy, and he happens to focus on Social Security. Appreciate the call.
Will do. Thanks for getting so fucking granular today.
Okay. Did not expect that guy to go there. Calling from a 352 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 352.
Is this me?
Yes, it is you.
Hey, I was just calling. Sorry, this is Jacob. I escaped from Florida. I'm in Georgia right now. I'm calling because I listened into the Ezra conversation, and I'm confused as to why he is unaware of why the train system did not go into place. I think Elon had a big hand in that. And then to mention Robert Moses, who, I'm not sure if you know, actually, has a very poor reputation now as a very rich person who used his power and influence that came from his wealth.
Yeah, that was the counter argument, and he acknowledged that it was problematic. But I think in his argument is that we went too far in protecting, like there's some type of, absolute sweet spot where you would, but I think that is, like you're opening the door to that. It's one thing for Josh Shapiro to say, we have an emergency, we got to build this bridge. And everybody goes, okay. I mean, we need this bridge in there. Everybody's going to have to take a hit because everybody agrees this is an emergency. It's another thing to say, well, we need high-speed rail here, and a lot of people are going to lose out. Or this housing, we're going to pull back on the filters, near the highway. And I only use that example because he'd use that example. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that's part of the problem that I was trying to raise. It's also like it is undemocratic, and it is undemocratic, right. Small d, as by design. Now that works out well sometimes, and that works out poorly sometimes, right? Like right. It worked out okay for Josh Shapiro in terms of that bridge. Not going so great, for people who want to take a subway from parts of Queens to Brooklyn or whatnot. Appreciate the call.
Yeah, actually, and one more thing, if I could. I defended my dissertation just a couple weeks ago. I graduated. Could I get a shofar?
Yeah, man. Good job.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate the call. The mill rind. Moses wasn't wealthy. He was just a beer bureaucrat who knew how to make the system work and how he accumulated power. But for all his failings, there's no evidence that Moses ever personally profited a great extent from his public works. For him, the project... No, that's true. But he also basically had imposed a little bit of like racism. I don't know how else to put that into his construction of... and also his personal, sort of like preferences as to what should be without having stakeholders in it. Now,
he would be driven around by a chauffeur and basically made a city that is good for people who are driven around by chauffeurs all the time. Not to say about how rich he was, but I read Moses' book, and that's the image that stuck with me as a guy sitting in the back of a seat saying, how can this be easy for me, a guy that rides in the back of seats?
Calling from a 719 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, this is Christian from Colorado. How are you?
Christian from Colorado. You're going to call and tell me about the bill that just died to build housing in Colorado that died basically because every Republican and about 3 or 4 Democrats voted against it. I can't remember what the name of the bill is.
I heard about that too. I wasn't. I was more so frustrated with your guest to address the, kind of points of it. Now, I'll admit, I haven't read the book, so maybe I'm missing something. But based off the conversation, there's so much wrong with the idea that like just pure deregulation gets you anywhere.
No, he's not for deregulation. He's looking to make government better.
Sorry, right. To improve government by allowing more construction, right? So in my community, we actually did that. And most of the homes constructed through, a developer deal with the local government, which ended up going awry because we actually had no legal grounding for some of the affordable housing asks that we made. Basically, the homes constructed there initially costed $600,000, right? And that was back then. They're selling for more than $1 million now, and that's in the span of like 5 years. So the approach was, okay, let's construct more homes. The housing situation isn't as bad yet. If we construct more homes, we can avoid this whole thing. Now, I think it's unfair to say that it caused more issue, or rather caused the increase by itself. I think there's a lot of factors to that. But, in of itself, the construction of all those condos, specifically the type of housing that was built, which was luxury condos for second homeowners, did actually increase the cost for a lot of these homes. Now, that has a lot of, negative impacts, like people who live on Social Security not being able to afford their property taxes anymore, and other millions of impacts, as I'm sure you're well aware. But the other example of the less zoning and more buildings code that kind of bothered me was this idea that if we're a little bit more lenient on the code itself for building, we're going to be in a better shape to be able to construct affordable housing. I'm not sure if Ezra knows that, housing is just expensive to build, period, in certain parts of the country, such as in Colorado, regardless if there's good code or bad code, so to say. And if we do construct shitty housing, for lack of better terms, or, cut corners housing, what ends up happening is exactly what we've seen with like the mobile home market or the trailer market, right? It's all these homes constructed with no regulation or rather easier code development. And sure, they're affordable up front, but then you get, 10, 15.
I think, to be fair, I don't think he's talking about building codes per se. I think he's talking about things like environmental review for the location that you're putting it, or in the context of housing that is built by the government, which barely happens. And it's not like, he went sort of silent when I said, how much government housing has Texas built?
Probably not.
My guess would be 0.
Yeah.
But his argument is that you need to, and I'm just, they're so specific, but I'm making these up. But you need to have union workers on this. You need to have make sure that you have bid the contract out to minority-owned construction company, or you need to have air filters if it's built close to high quality air filters if it's close to a highway. Those constraints, he's arguing, are extraneous to the actual core building mission.
I guess my the criticism of that of some of that, I'm not sure because I don't experience it locally, but I will say, like, bar none, the biggest problem locally is the lack of actual local control for some of this. I don't have access in Colorado to anything like a vacancy tax, right? Charging people for leaving their home vacant, because the majority, or not majority, but I think, actually, no, yes, more than 52% of our homes are owned by second homeowners. A lot of those sit vacant for a long time out of the year. So, we don't have those measures to raise funds to actually.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
homes.
The tax code can deal with that. The tax code can deal with that locally. It can deal with it on a statewide basis. You could deal with it federally. And
when you're not,
you could increase so-called capital gains, so that housing is not an asset, or it's a diminished asset. I mean, there's a lot of different ways to go at this. They chose one, and it just is. I mean, as part of a milieu of things to do, I could see okay, but there's a lot of other ways to do it. And I could not get out of the book or any interview I watched or any interview I had with Ezra the answer to why that one. That is the one on the ground that builders point to, or that maybe local government officials point to. But perhaps you're talking to a class of people who are disincentivized to think about making homes less profitable.
Right.
And I think for them, it may be the low-hanging fruit, but it's also the fruit that is feeding people. And so if you pick it and just throw it to the side, I don't know. It's a problem, but appreciate the call.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, folks. My brain hurts. Sam, you're so granular today.
You're playing the game called capitalism.
That is the fascinating thing to me. How is there no critique of that at all? No critique of capitalism. I am quite sure that I have been called a shit lib more than Ezra Klein. Because people in Ezra's world, they don't even have a concept of the word. But I don't know how you look at this and have no critique of capitalism. Think that this happens in a complete vacuum. It is there is, and he came close to saying this, no, wait, this is just the way things are. That's the problem. When I pull out too much and see money as an issue, he will not go there. I'm tempted to play that clip from that show that I have. Maybe we'll play that Friday, because I got to go back over and maybe watch the interview. Oh, God help me. I'm so tired of even talking about abundance. Honestly, just the idea that I had to fucking read that book. It's not great. It just isn't, as a piece of writing, it's just not, it's neither fish nor fowl. It's easy to consume, but it's not.
It's almost too easy to consume.
I mean, and to be fair, most of the policy-based books we have on here are written by academics and
University Press.
And they are very specific about what they're writing about. And when you read a commentator book, and I say this as a commentator, I don't have the same value add, and he's done a lot of reporting, Ezra has, and I'm sure he did reporting for this as well. But there is a tendency to pull out very narrow, specific examples, to analogize California and Texas. I just don't think there's enough controlled elements to make this straight assessment. When you're talking about San Francisco and Houston, I just don't, I'm sorry.
D and R aren't the variables to be monitoring, I don't think.
And to talk about New York City, New York's a fairly unique city in the world. But, Worcester has grown by 60,000 people in 30 or 40 years. And they have housing problems and costs are going up. But I don't think that's pretty good for a city to be able to keep up with that. And in some respects, it's because Worcester is sort of there's not a huge, at least, at the start, there are not huge pockets of wealth in Worcester. I would probably put Worcester's wealth inequality on the low end for the East Coast, I would bet. And things could actually get done. There were still incumbent interests, without a doubt. But things can actually get done there in some way. There's some Massachusetts laws that impact Worcester, but they're a function of wealthy suburbs from outside of Boston that the city is subjected to. So there's definitely some problem, but I just don't think it's when you're comparing high density and low density locations, it seems like the dynamics are different. But
I mean, the left regularly makes villains out of people say, I love him as a basketball player, but Steph Curry for being a NIMBY. To me, it's just, like you said, it's money.
It's money. All right, folks. I'm sorry if you've been holding on the phones for an extended period of time. I made an explicit point to everyone here in the room that we were going to get to the calls. I got to 3 or 4. I wanted to do more.
You don't respect the rule of law. You've shat all over it. That's what you did.
Damn, things are getting spicy around here. Okay, 10 IMs. Revolutionary status quo. Why didn't we talk about the fact that state regulations as opposed to federal regulations largely a result of capital interest? Obviously, different regulations are necessary for different regions, but as long as we're complaining about bad regulations, there should be an understanding of why it's bad. Suddenly, Ezra has no policy perspective, and he can't be bothered to think about the outcomes of those policies when you've been calling yourself a policy wonk for years. Now you're getting it, Sam. It's all our fault.
Somebody's a little bit defensive.
Not that, Aaron. Median household income in San Francisco is 3 times that of Houston, and studio rent is 2 times. You just can't compare rent prices without looking at salaries. Yes. I wonder if you took the same locations he's talking about and compared homeless populations to median wage and median cost of housing. But they don't want to look at that lens. They are going to one specific source. It's like you're talking to an ant on an elephant and you're finding out what the problem is. And then you're trying to generalize that this should be a big political message across the board.
As a way to be more persuasive.
And particularly as the frustration associated with they mentioned Bernie and Trump campaign, the popularity. The popularity for those two is not a function of there being too much environmental protection in cities that have been hollowed out. That's not the problem. That is just decidedly not the problem. Cities being too expensive in San Francisco and New York is a problem, but they're going to vote for Cuomo in this city. I mean, hope springs eternal. But still time. This guy stood in front of a more progressive policy and was more in the pocket of developers. I don't know. It just seems a little blinkered to me. But number 13, honestly, I bet few, if any, House Republicans have even read their bill. They probably either had AI write it or most crude, vile lobbyists.
Alec AI.
Regardless of how this interview goes, I think the amount of increasing collaboration and discussion between the left and center left at this time is a very good sign. There's more than this collaboration between the center left and center right. So this implies a leftward trajectory to me. Basically, it's AOC time. I mean, the part of this project, maybe not necessarily Ethan and Derek's, but part of this project is for the centrists to develop a movement within the Democratic Party. Now, they seem to always fail. So we'll see. Hey, Ron, if you can write a whole book on policy and not come with a single policy that will offend capitalists, I don't want to hear from you. Nova from Connecticut. I think we should jettison Ezra Klein from the coalition. Batty from Cincinnati. If you have time for one more call on abundance, look for my 260 number. I'd love to compare and contrast housing advocacy in California and the Midwest. Friday. California Democrats are incredibly corrupted by money. They literally stopped planning high-speed rail because of Elon Musk. California Democrats just happen to be less corrupt than California Republicans. That's basically the whole story. Biscay Truel. A note for Los Angeles listeners, SB 79 will allow upcoming around metro stations to avoid the NIMBY issues. Call your representatives. The issue with California high-speed rail were lawsuits and lack of upfront funding small portions at a time. Well, his argument is that the lawsuits are a function of too much environmental regulations. But, you know, there's something equivalent with cannabis legalization in this state. There were lawsuits that held up a bunch of dispensaries from opening in large parts of the state. Large parts, because they were sued by a group that wanted to own dispensaries because they were being shut out. There was the first dispensaries were awarded to groups that had, groups of investors or buyers or whatever, who had a past inequity because of marijuana laws. So if you had gone to prison, or if you had something confiscated, or something to those along the lines. And the lawsuit was a function of that. And it held up the opening of dispensaries by 6 to 8 months. It hurt growers. It was difficult, without a doubt. There were other problems, but that was definitely one of them. There was one or two lawsuits. And you could argue that if we want to get the dispensaries open, we do not have to have an equity element to it. And that's what his argument is. But the problem is that down the road, you start having these major corporations own the dispensaries. You start getting a degraded product. You stop helping build economic durability. So you have a new set of problems down the road. And I would argue that those set of problems are not only problematic as a first order question, right? But you also have a second order in that you have allowed incumbent wealthy interests who then prevent you from fixing it a lot more than the other problems. There is no systemic 5-year, 10-year vision for the implications of running everything like you did I-95 by Josh Shapiro. State of emergency, we're just doing this. The bridge, you know what the job is. We're going to replace this bridge. We know the scope of it. We know the time it's going to take. We know the purpose it's going to serve. We know how many people are going to be dispossessed. We know how, it's going to affect people living around there because the bridge already existed. This isn't building a new bridge and creating a whole set of problems that you're not going to actually take any time to have the constituencies weigh in. You're going to have problems down the road. All right. Can we talk about the all-powerful sunset movement lobby? They've had far too much control over our public regulation.
I blanched at that because I didn't hear about this solar moratorium, but I did know Sunrise was telling Joe Biden to declare a climate emergency, which would have been a way to do some of this stuff.
I mean, that was part of the challenge. Like, okay, I didn't know there was a chapter that did this of the Sunrise Movement. I'm not aware of that. Mark and Antonio, does Ezra not think neoliberalism runs California? Well, they also wrote the book to fight back against degrowth people.
Yeah.
Chris from Colorado. In Colorado, I can't, as a local elected official, impose a vacancy tax, a transfer tax, or any sort of rent cap or control, increase lodging, and so much more. This doesn't feel right to me. All right, 3 more. Draw Nathan. Why do we even have a CDC? Says exactly what RFK's purpose is for occupying its position. He's a libertarian proxy sitting atop a hill just so nobody else will, rendering that department totally powerless. Him being the head of Health and Human Services, the same as saying it shouldn't exist. Fenton Muley fan. Oh, sorry. I read that one before. All right, 2 more. CLM. Is there anything to be said about private property influencing ability to fund building, or is that private property so ingrained in how we function that it's easier to work with than try and go after it? He doesn't even recognize it as anything other than you have to take it as a given. Worcester Don Draper. Within 3 minutes of my 30-minute Uber ride in Kansas City, my driver asked me if I knew what red pill content was. Totally unprovoked. Surreal situation. And the final I am of the day. Ryan from Rochester. He kept talking about Texas, cheaper housing. Land is cheaper in housing because as a commodity. It's seen widely available in Texas. The quality of the land is seen as poor because it's barren desert-like land. Its unique geographic place affects its cost compared to California's paradise pricing. AOC endorses Zoran. Is that right?
Oh, hell yeah.
Did we get that?
Yeah, where is that at? I haven't seen that, so.
We have the new newsroom on it. Is that true, or is it not? Anything I said before the sound of that music means that it's not necessarily
provisional.
Confirmed. Guys.
I'm looking.
Googling here.
Yeah, I don't know. Did that person provide a link?
It's hard to prove a negative on Google. If it didn't happen,
or on Twitter for that matter,
we're not going to find anything that says it didn't happen.
I haven't seen that, and
nope. All right, maybe that was aspirational, folks. Matt, Russ, Brian, Emma, and Abstentia. Great job today, folks. See you tomorrow.